I didn't expect to see her there. It was just another Tuesday morning at Millie's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's strong enough to wake the dead and the vinyl booths still have cracks from decades of use. I sat in my usual spot by the window, the one with the wobbly table leg, stirring cream into my coffee like it was some sacred ritual. The waitress, Donna, didn't even ask anymore. She just slid the mug toward me with a tired smile and said, "The usual, Tom." From the outside, my life probably looked perfect. Good job. Nice house in the suburbs. 2 kids, both grown now, living their own lives. My neighbors saw a man who mowed his lawn every Saturday, who waved when he passed by, who kept his trash cans neatly aligned at the curb. They didn't see the silence inside. The house was too big now. After the divorce, I told myself I'd get used to it. But 5 years later, I still caught myself turning to say something to someone who wasn't there. The kids called, sure. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional Sunday check-in. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was. I took a slow sip of coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. That's when I heard it. A laugh I hadn't heard in years. Light, effortless. The kind that used to fill up a room. My chest tightened before I even looked. And there she was. Linda. She stood near the register, chatting with the cashier like no time had passed at all. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, but she still had that way of tucking it behind her ear when she smiled. She looked happy, at ease, like the last decade of my life hadn't even left a mark on hers. I should have said something, called her name, walked over, but I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, my fingers gripping the mug like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. She turned then, just a glance toward the windows, toward the booths, toward me. Our eyes met. A heartbeat. 2. Then, nothing. No recognition, no flicker of memory. Just the polite, distant look you give a stranger before turning away. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd moved on. But right then, in that quiet diner with the hum of old rock playing overhead, I realized something terrible. She had moved on. And I was still sitting in that booth, waiting for a past that didn't exist anymore. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The diner noise faded, the clinking plates, the murmur of conversations. Even Donna's voice calling out an order. All of it blurred into silence, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. The only thing left was the sight of Linda standing there, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was wearing a navy blue sweater, one that brought out the sharp green of her eyes. I knew that color. I remembered it. She used to wear something like it on weekends, curled up on the couch with a book, her feet tucked under her. Back when we still shared a couch. Back when she still looked at me like I was someone worth looking at. Now her gaze slid right past me. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe it was the years. Maybe I was just another face in the crowd now. But then, just as she turned to leave, she hesitated. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. A small, almost imperceptible pause. Did she see me? My pulse hammered in my throat. I wanted to stand up, to call her name, to force some kind of reaction. But what would I even say? Remember me? Remember us? The weight of all those unspoken words pressed down on me, keeping me in my seat. And then it was over. She walked out, the bell above the door chiming behind her like nothing had happened. I exhaled, slow and shaky. My coffee had gone cold. Donna refilled my cup without asking, her eyes flickering toward the door. "You all right, Tom?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just thinking." She nodded like she understood, but no one could. How do you explain that 5 years of silence could be shattered by a single glance? That a woman you once knew better than yourself could become a stranger in the span of a heartbeat? I reached for my wallet, my fingers brushing against an old receipt tucked inside. A scrap of paper from a gas station, years old, with her handwriting on the back. A grocery list maybe, or a reminder. I'd kept it without realizing, carried it with me like some kind of relic. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just gone. She was erased, and I was still holding on to receipts. I left cash on the table and stepped out into the morning light, half expecting to see her there, waiting. but the sidewalk was empty. Just the wind pushing a crumpled napkin along the pavement, like the ghost of something that used to matter. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Did she even recognize me? Or worse, did she and just not care? 3 days passed before I saw her again. I told myself I wasn't looking for her, that my usual route to the post office just happened to pass by the florist shop where she now stood, arranging sunflowers in the window. Her hands moved with the same deliberate care I remembered from when she'd tend to her garden on Sunday mornings, back when Sundays still meant something. I should have kept walking. But my feet betrayed me, pausing right outside the glass. The autumn sun caught the silver in her hair, turning it luminous. She looked up. This time, there was no mistaking it. She saw me. Really saw me. Her hands stilled. A petal drifted to the counter between us. Tom. My name in her mouth felt like a relic. The way she said it, not cold, not warm, just acknowledging, made my throat tighten. Linda. I nodded, the way you might greet a neighbor you barely know. The distance between us felt physical, like I was staring across a canyon. She wiped her hands on her apron. A wedding band glinted on her finger. Newer than ours had been. Shinier. How have you been? The ordinary question hung between us, weighted with everything we weren't saying. I could have told her about the quiet house, the way I still set 2 coffee mugs out some mornings out of habit. Instead, I said, Good. You? Really good. And she meant it. I could hear it in her voice, see it in the ease of her posture. No hesitation, no shadows. A customer called from inside the shop. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me with an apologetic smile. I should... Of course. I stepped back. The sun felt suddenly too bright. She turned away, then paused. It was nice seeing you, Tom. Nice, like we were old classmates, like 23 years of marriage could be reduced to a polite exchange on the sidewalk. I walked away before she could see my hand shake. Halfway down the block, I realized I was clutching the envelope in my pocket, the one containing my daughter's wedding invitation that I still hadn't filled out, the one where it asked for a +1. The florist's bell jingled behind me. I didn't look back. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible truth settled like dust. She wasn't pretending to be okay. She just was. I found it while cleaning out my wallet that night, the faded gas station receipt with her handwriting on the back. The paper had softened at the edges from years of unconscious handling. Milk, eggs, rye bread, it said in her quick slanting script. Below that, in my own hand, anniversary, reservation 7 p.m. The date was still legible, 2 weeks before everything fell apart. I sat at the kitchen table with the yellowed scrap between my fingers, the overhead light too bright against the quiet dark outside. We'd never used those reservations. I couldn't even remember now what fight had canceled them. Something about my work schedule, or her mother, or the way I'd loaded the dishwasher wrong again. The specifics had blurred, but the aftermath remained sharp as broken glass. My thumb traced the indentation where her pen had pressed hard into the paper. She'd always made lists like this, practical, efficient, no wasted space, no sentimental clutter. I used to tease her about it. Now I understood. She'd been practicing detachment long before she left. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. I stared at my reflection in the black kitchen window, a gray-haired stranger holding onto a receipt for groceries never bought, an anniversary never celebrated. How many other unfinished lists had she written in those final months while I remained oblivious? How many exit strategies had she tucked between the mundane? I should have thrown it away. Instead, I smoothed the crease along the anniversary line and reached for my phone. Our daughter Sarah answered on the 3rd ring. Dad, everything okay? I opened my mouth to ask if she ever talked to her mother about us, about why it really ended, about whether Linda ever regretted, but the words dissolved like sugar in coffee. Just wanted to hear your voice, I said instead. We made small talk about her job, about the wedding plans. When she mentioned her mother was helping with the florist recommendations, something cold settled in my chest. They spoke regularly then, shared confidences. Maybe even laughed about poor old Dad still living in the past. After we hung up, I placed the receipt carefully in the junk drawer among the spare batteries and takeout menus. Not quite ready to let go, but no longer willing to carry it with me every day. The house creaked like it always did at night. The same sounds that used to make Linda jump and say, "What was that?" Now there was no one to ask, no one to reassure, just the empty rooms echoing with all the conversations we should have had. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, wondering, when exactly had she stopped writing my name on her lists? The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of elegant detail Linda would have chosen. Our daughter's wedding, addressed only to me. I ran my thumb over the raised script, feeling the absence like a missing tooth. No and guest. No acknowledgement that I might have moved on too, just my solitary name floating in all that white space. The RSVP card slipped from the envelope. I stared at the empty line where I was meant to check accepts or declines. My pen hovered between them like a plane circling an airport, running low on fuel. The house was too quiet. I turned on the radio, some talk show murmuring about retirement planning, just to hear another human voice. The host's laughter sounded hollow against the ticking kitchen clock. I opened the junk drawer. The receipt still lay where I'd left it, but something had changed. Where I'd once seen evidence of our unraveling, now I just saw groceries, milk, eggs, bread. The ordinary artifacts of a life she'd kept living while mine had stalled. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Did you get the invite? Mom's handling the flowers. She says peonies are in season." The casual mention of her hit like a sucker punch. Of course Linda was involved. Of course she knew about peonies and seasons and all the living details I'd never noticed. While I'd been collecting scraps of our dead past, she'd been building a new language of flowers. I walked to the living room, to the bookshelf that still held our old photo albums. The spines cracked when I opened one. Vacation photos from Yosemite, Sarah's first birthday, that anniversary cruise where we'd gotten drunk on cheap champagne. Linda's smile looked different in every picture. When had it stopped reaching her eyes? The last page was empty. No more trips to document after the divorce, just blank sleeves waiting for memories that never came. I closed the album too hard. Dust motes swirled in the late afternoon light. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler hissed across a lush green lawn, life continuing everywhere but here. The RSVP card still waited on the table. I picked up my pen and checked accepts before I could change my mind. My handwriting looked shaky, like an old man's. As I sealed the envelope, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small penciled mark near the return address. Sarah's handwriting, faint but deliberate. "Dad, come alone?" Not a question, a reminder. The realization settled over me like cold water. This wasn't just about Linda moving on. Everyone had. And somehow, without meaning to, I'd become the ghost at the feast. The wedding was everything Linda would have planned. Peonies in mason jars, strings of Edison bulbs glowing against the sunset, the scent of lavender mixing with salt air. I stood at the edge of the vineyard watching Sarah beam under the oak arbor, her hands clasped around her fiancé's. From this distance, I could almost pretend the silver-haired woman adjusting her daughter's veil wasn't my ex-wife. Linda looked beautiful. The realization tasted bitter. She wore a lilac dress that brought out the summer tan on her arms, and when she laughed at something, the groom said, it was the full-throated laugh I hadn't heard in a decade. The one that used to make restaurant patrons turn and smile. I sipped my bourbon, the ice long melted. No one had noticed my arrival. I'd timed it that way, slipping in after the processional, lingering near the back. The place card at the reception table confirmed my suspicions. Thomas Mitchell, seated between Sarah's college roommate and the groom's ancient uncle. At the head table, Linda chatted easily with the new in-laws, her fingers resting on the arm of a gray-bearded man whose name I didn't know. The band started playing At Last. My fingers tightened around the glass. We danced to this at our wedding, Linda's head tucked under my chin, her whispered finally, warm against my collarbone. Now she was leading the new couple onto the floor, her lilac dress swirling as she demonstrated the right way to twirl the bride. I set down my drink. The barn doors stood open to the June night, moths fluttering around the lanterns. No one saw me leave. The parking lot gravel crunched under my dress shoes. Halfway to my car, a voice called my name. Tom? Linda stood silhouetted in the barn light, one hand shielding her eyes. You're not leaving already? The question hung between us. I could have said the bourbon was too strong, that my back hurt, that I was happy for Sarah, but weddings made me sentimental. Instead, I said nothing, just watched as she stepped closer, the light catching the silver at her temples. She smelled like gardenias, new perfume. I'm glad you came, she said. Not we, just I, as if she'd been the one to grant me permission. Over her shoulder, I could see the gray-bearded man watching from the doorway, a protective stance, like I might cause a scene. I sent the check, I said instead, for the honeymoon. Linda nodded. Sarah told me that was generous. Generous, like I was a distant relative, a benefactor, not her father. A burst of laughter spilled from the barn. The song had changed to something upbeat. Linda glanced back instinctively, pulled toward the music, the light, the life happening without me. Go back, I said. They'll miss you. She hesitated. For one impossible second, I thought she might reach for me. Then she smoothed her dress and nodded. Take care of yourself, Tom. Not goodbye, not let's talk soon. Just an instruction, like she was closing a file. I waited until she disappeared into the golden rectangle of the barn door before getting in my car. The dashboard clock glowed 9:17 p.m. Earlier than I'd planned, but later than I should have stayed. As I turned onto the dark country road, a single firefly hit my windshield, one bright, fleeting spark before vanishing into the night. I drove without headlights for 100 yards just to see if I could. The real question wasn't why I left the wedding. It was why I'd ever thought I belonged there in the first place. 3 months after the wedding, the first photograph arrived. Sarah, in her white dress, glowing under the oak arbor, her hands clasped around her husband's. The kind of picture I should have had framed on my mantle. Instead, it came in a plain envelope with no note, just my name written in Sarah's careful script. I held it under the kitchen light, studying the details I'd missed that day. The way Linda's hand rested on Sarah's shoulder, protective, proud. The empty space beside me where no one had stood. I hadn't spoken to Linda since the wedding. Not really. But that night I found myself driving past her florist shop, the way I used to when we were first divorced, just to see if the lights were still on. Her car was there. Through the window I could see her at the counter, sorting through receipts. Alone. The bell jingled when I walked in. She looked up, startled, her hands freezing mid-task. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, softly, Tom. I set the photograph on the counter between us. Sarah sent this. Linda's fingers brushed the edge of the photo, hesitant. She told me she was mailing them. A pause. You left so early. You noticed. The words hung there, heavier than I'd intended. Linda exhaled, slow and measured, the way she used to when I'd come home late from work and she'd been waiting up. I always notice, she said. The admission settled between us, fragile as a petal. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the walls. I pointed to the photograph, to the space beside me. Why wasn't he in the picture? Linda stilled. Who? The man you were with, the one watching us when we talked outside. Her brow furrowed. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a soft, tired sound. That was Bill, Sarah's father-in-law. A beat. His wife died last year. The truth landed gently like snow. Not a lover, not a replacement, just a widower, standing guard over his own grief. Linda studied me, her eyes searching for something. You really thought? I didn't answer. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. Somewhere in the back room, a faucet dripped. After a moment, Linda reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small cardboard box. Inside were stacks of receipts, bundled with rubber bands. She slid one free and handed it to me. My handwriting. A note I'd left her years ago. Gone to hardware store. Back by dinner. Love you. I kept them too, she said quietly. The paper trembled in my hands. All this time I'd thought she'd moved on completely, but some part of her had been preserving the past, just like me. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Linda didn't reach for the note back. She just stood there, waiting, as if she'd been waiting for years. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. The real question wasn't why we'd kept these scraps. It was whether we'd ever be brave enough to show them to each other while there was still time.